In this lesson, we'll learn how to work with trajectories. Trajectories visually show us the path of action our object travels along through time. But let's go ahead and learn some other things we can do with trajectories. Selecting the ship, we'll go to our trajectories rollout right next to parameters. And here are all of our settings. So at the top, what we see is the ability to get to the sub-object level of our trajectory, which will allow us to access our keyframes. Now, underneath in our trajectories rollout, we can add keys, but that's only when we have the sub-object level turned on. And we can delete keys as well. Our sample range, this is for collapsing our animation down so it can, in this case, have no more connection to a path constraint. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that very shortly. Underneath, we see we can convert our trajectories down into shapes that we can then use as possible shapes for path constraints. So to work with trajectories here, what we'll first do is collapse our animation down. And firstly, let's go ahead and adjust our range here. For the end time, we'll set this to about frame 70. And then for the samples, to make sure we generate enough keyframes to preserve our animation, I'll go ahead and set the samples to about 30 keys. Now we can go to collapse, and as we do, we see these open squares that represent our keyframes. And what we'll also see, if we go to parameters, select our path and delete it, we'll see that our object no longer has any connection to that path. Now, something that's very important, if I were to just undo back to where we had the path, under our rotation track, we'll see that when an object is constrained to a path, we have free reign to animate the rotation of that object, even though it is following the contour of our path and orientation. So that's something very nice in Max. But once we go to trajectories, that doesn't mean we wouldn't want to check off rotation. We'd still want to leave that checked on under collapse, transform. Otherwise, we'd only have this object move in its position. So I'll go ahead and again choose collapse. Okay, and we can make sure that we're seeing the trajectory now of this animated object. We can go back to parameters and delete our path. Then we go back to trajectories. Alright, so selecting our object here, if we were to go to our sub-object level, accessing our keys, again we can take these keys and we could actually move them around to make a new direction, if you will, for our object. We'll see that update in the animation. I'll go ahead and undo that. I like the first result better, far better. Now what we can also do with this trajectory again is delete keyframes or add keys. To do that, if we'd like to add a key, you'd go ahead and activate that and then add it to whatever frame you'd like, represented by these small white dots. Now to delete a key, you'd first want to toggle off add key and then go to those keys that you've created, or any key for that matter, and simply choose delete key. So if you wanted, you could even delete another key that has been made without us having to add a key. Alright, but I'm going to go ahead and leave that key back so we can have a nice path. Now, what we can also do with trajectories is convert them to a spline shape using convert to and convert from. These options would be for not only making a shape, but to, let's say, have our object still, or have an object still follow a path without necessarily using the path constraint. So if we wanted to convert this trajectory to a shape, we can use convert to. And if you see, going back to parameters, there is the shape that it's made. Great, so now, again, we can use this shape to make another path constraint if we like. I'm going to go ahead and remove that now. So that's a quick look at trajectory. Something else you want to keep in mind is that under the display panel, notice you can turn on trajectories for your object from here as well. Great, so that concludes this lesson.